Welcome back. You're watching our special broadcast. Now, although located in different countries, Mosul in Iraq and Aleppo in Syria, both cities are key for militants. The expulsion of jihadists from them will be an important turning point in the battle against them. In Iraq, Mosul is surrounded by the Iraqi army and the Kurds, assisted by air from the US. In Syria, Aleppo is surrounded by the Syrian army and supported by air from Russia. Now, because of the hostilities, the shelling by artillery and bombing from air, the civilians are paying the price with their lives. But there is a significant difference between Mosul and Aleppo. The US and EU, including other nations, condemn the situation in Aleppo, but there's no similar condemnation for actions in Mosul. Why is that? What is actually the ground situation? What are the military solutions to each and how are they different? We'll talk about that. Once again, joining me on the show is Mr. Petr Topichkanov, senior researcher and associate with the Carnegie Moscow Center. We have Sanjay Kapoor, editor of Hard News magazine, Daniele Pagani, WION'S international correspondent, of course, who's just back from Mosul after covering the offensive there, and Mandy Clark, a bureau chief from London, joins us. Let me start by asking you, Daniele, once again, why does it seem that the situation in Aleppo is stuck where the offensive in Iraq seems to be moving at a much faster pace?
Well, we have to take into consideration that there are certain differences between the two cities. So when it comes to the offensive of Mosul, we have to think about Mosul as the last step taken by the Iraqi army and the coalition forces. Because before there was Tikrit, then Ramadi, then Fallujah, and then Aleppo, which is the last stronghold of the Islamic State in Iraq. This is not the same thing that is happening in Syria, where Aleppo is Syria's largest city. Half of it is in the hands of the rebels, but the rebels, not Jabhat al-Nusra, but the Islamic State, still control consistent part of the territory and the city of Raqqa, which is the Islamic State capital city.
Right. All right. In fact, quickly let me go across to Mr. Sanjay Kapoor. Thanks so much for joining us here on WION. Why do you think militarily, what are the differences according to you that you see between the fight that's going on in Mosul and the other one in Aleppo?
You know, it's been very clear that Aleppo and Mosul, both major points where, the battle against Islamic State would be decided, both seem at the threshold of, where the Islamic State would be defeated in the coming days, become almost like a foregone conclusion. Although Aleppo has a very little Islamic State present, it's more Nusra in its new avatar which occupies it. The reason why they seem very different is that in Iraq, you have the Iraqi army backed by the United States, which is leading the charge, whereas in in Aleppo, you have the Russians, along with the Syrian army of Bashar al-Assad, with Iranian militia, which is taking on. So, you have to see in terms of what kind of narrative has been created against the Russian-led force, where, Russians are bombing there. You have Aleppo, which is seen to be a city which is divided into three parts, but the message that is coming out is that the entire Aleppo, for example, is getting bombed out, which is not true. It's a small little enclave where, although there are about 250,000 people there, but most of the people were not allowed to step out, primarily because you had the militants or the so-called people opposed to Assad who were not allowing them to come out, because that would mean normalcy would return to that place. So it's been a very hard-fought kind of battle which is taking place, but I think we would see the end very soon.
All right, we'll see the end very soon. Now, very quickly, let me pull out some graphics for our viewers to put things in perspective. First up, Mosul, the battle for which has progressed steadily, although it would seem with less fanfare. Reports about the plight of the civilian population are less, although over 1 million people have, live under the control of the Islamic State. There are reports of them being used as human shields as well. Now, the numbers, there are about 5,000 to 7,000 Islamic State fighters in the city, but the government and allied forces number that around 90,000. The battle for Mosul is now on its 40th day. The Iraqi army is moving in on the city from the south. Its Kurdish allies are coming down from the north, though. Shia paramilitaries are providing the backup and support, while the US Special Forces advisors are an other element over there. That is the situation in Aleppo. Let's quickly also take a look at what's in Mosul. In fact, what's happening in Aleppo is it has received far more media attention, even though fighting has been concentrated only in the eastern part of the city. We'll talk about that in our next segment, but this is where the Islamist fighters are based. The total population there is estimated around 300,000 or less. Western Aleppo is a government territory, while eastern Aleppo is being held by a coalition of Islamist groups. The Syrian army is the main force on the ground. Allied with it are fighters from Shia Hezbollah and related groups. The Russians provide the aerial support, including reconnaissance and bombing. Now, Mr. Topichkanov, if I can come to you, we've seen throughout that Russians have been consistently providing air support as far as fighting in Aleppo is concerned. Give us a sense of why there are no boots on the ground of Russians, and how do you see this militarily differently, you know, what's happening in Aleppo and on the other hand in Mosul?
Russia understands very clear that if we have boots on the ground, we will have casualties, and it will not be supported by the population. The first point. The second point is during the course of civilian war in Syria, the first special forces of Syrian armed forces, but also their partners from Iran, they're not very efficient, but they're quite efficient, and so there is no need for a heavy military presence of Russia on the ground. But at the same time, I would say that there are some suspicions that Russia may have some people on the ground, operators, intelligence officers, those who are providing support for airstrikes and reconnaissance missions of the Russian air forces in Syria. So from this point of view, I wouldn't say that Russia doesn't have military personnel on the ground at all.
Okay, and how do you see things militarily different in Mosul? Will you be able to give us a sense, a perspective on that?
I would agree that the key difference is that in Aleppo, there is a key united actor, which is the armed forces of Syria and its special forces. So, and I would say that, yes, of course, there is a huge critical statements about victims, civilian victims of the Russian airstrikes. But I would say that in such cases, the most number of victims are caused not by airstrikes, but by the violence on the ground, by the participation of the ground forces and special forces in the town, because this is the most difficult and challenging part of the military operation.
Right.
So, yeah.
Please carry on, complete.
Yeah. And from this point of view, we have the main actor on the ground. This is the difference from Mosul, where the Iraqi armed forces are not so maybe united and motivated, and the more and more active role is played by the coalition forces. And if you follow footages and video accounts about events around Mosul, you could hear different languages, European languages, English language, and different actors are involved in the offensive on Mosul.
Very crucial points that you made, Mr. Topichkanov. Let me quickly get in Mandy at this point as well. Mandy, you've covered so many conflict zones. Give us a sense. Would you agree with what Mr. Topichkanov has been saying about the key differences as far as military operations, the way the tactics are concerned? And take us through, you were mentioning chemical weapons that have been used in the Syrian civil war. We've seen news of that in the past. That is something that we haven't seen in Iraq as of now as far as the Mosul offensive is concerned. What are the key differences? How do you see it?
Well, to go back to Daniele's point, he said this is the final push to get Islamic State out. They have one key player. It's not as divided as Aleppo, who has a lot of factions and different Islamists who are there. Also, the big announcement, first they announced it, they made a very clear announcement, we are going to come to Mosul, and they made it clear that although there are US who are backing it with air power, this is going to be an Iraqi special forces-led operation backed by the Peshmerga and the Shia. So it was very much, they wanted to present the message that this is coming from the Iraqi forces, as one of your contributors just said, Iraqi forces are not nearly as well trained as the Syrians, so they need a lot more help. And you are getting a lot of advisors on the ground. I think the last time I heard, there's around 5,000 American advisors on the ground, but they are not leading the physical push. They're there to advise in a similar role, as mentioned, as the Russians who are doing reconnaissance and helping guide those operations on the ground. So, you know, it's different in that way. And also, the Aleppo fight has lasted much, much longer than Mosul. Mosul has been it's just 40 days long, but they did say when they announced it that they expect it to take months because it's going to be street-to-street fighting. That's where you're going to see high casualties, and that's where we're seeing high casualties in Aleppo now.
Daniele, enlighten us about what's happening, the strategical difference in the attack. We were talking about this earlier. Why does it seem that, you know, things in Mosul are happening quickly, but it's taking time for things to shape up or to end, you know, so to speak, in Aleppo?
So there is again a consistent difference. So again, we are witnessing an attack when it comes to Mosul, where the Iraqi counter-terrorism forces are the sharp edge of an entire coalition who are leading the operation, boots on the ground. Okay.
They've already had.
Yeah, they have conquered at least what they say 1/3 of the eastern part of the city, which does not mean that they are close to victory, not at all, because I was exactly within the city of Mosul in, I would say, Wednesday, and the battle is very tough. It's street by street, home by home. It will take a very long time. The difference is that the extensive use of airstrikes is not taking place in Mosul right now, at least as per what I have witnessed staying there several days in a row. The main battle is happening boots on the ground, whereas in Aleppo, what is happening is a kind of a reverse situation. So there have been many airstrikes, and now the forces are entering the eastern part of the city. So now what is happening right now in Aleppo is what has been happening in Mosul for the last, I would say, 2 weeks at least.
Okay. Right, and also give us a sense of, you know, the strategical difference in the attack. We were talking about how, you know, the weapons used are different, and, you know, the strategy is completely different in both these places where the offensive is on.
Yes, in Mosul you really have a perfect urban guerrilla scenario. Just maybe to enlighten a little bit about what it means, boots on the ground, that situation. I can speak about the situation. Yeah. So on Wednesday I was visiting the field, the hospital within the city of Mosul, and the Iraqi soldier who was in charge of documenting the operation showed me the footage of what it means to battle in the city of Mosul. So the footage showed 10 soldiers ducked outside of a small abandoned house, asking if someone was inside. They got an answer, a very feeble voice saying, yes, we are inside, we are a family, we are scared. So they asked back them to come out very slowly. What happens is that the door of the apartment opens, and instead of a family there were 4 or 5 terrorists of the Islamic State, and they started fighting, wounding 6 of the soldiers, killing 1 of the soldiers. So this is what it means, boots on the ground. So that is what is happening right now in Mosul. It will eventually happen the same thing in Aleppo from now onward.
Right. Also, we'd like to take a very short break here, but there's still a lot more coming up. I'd like all my guests to please stay on with me. We're going to try and compare how the media coverage of both these offensives, be it Mosul and East Aleppo, is very different. We'll discuss that after this very short break. Stay with us. We'll be back.